Hello, I'm Alina, the social media manager at EdgeWeaver, and today I am fortunate enough to interview Danielle Gomes, who is the author of our most recent book, Roll and Bones.
Hi, I'm so happy to be here. Thank you.
Tell us a little bit about yourself.
Uh, I am an author. I live in New Jersey. I have just always been in love with stories, whether it's books or movies. So now I just get to write stories all day, and I love that. And if I'm not writing, I am spending time with my husband and two sons.
That's really great to hear. Um, how does your family think, or what does your family think about you being published at
Oh,
EdgeWeaver?
they're so happy for me. They're
Yeah,
really, yeah, they're very supportive. They think it's great. They're really happy.
I'm really glad. So, um, to get into more specific questions about the book, um, you've you've almost not almost you've masterfully balanced, the psychological realism with supernatural elements in Roll and Bones. So, what was sort of your approach to maintaining that almost delicate equilibrium throughout the narrative?
I think my approach, I always do a ton of research. So I did a lot of research into kind of mental health and what someone that was suffering from an episode might feel like. But then I also just relied on, like, I love haunted houses. I love scary movies. I love being afraid, knowing that I'm safe. But so I had to like imagine how you would feel if you were that afraid, but you didn't know that you were safe. So I did research to know symptoms, how you might react, and then I just used my own experiences.
And I would assume your like one's reaction would be a lot more different when you know you're safe versus the uncertainty of it.
Right. And I kind
Oh,
of
well,
use that.
sorry, go
Sorry, go
ahead.
ahead. I I used that in a way that, because Lilith throughout the story is kind of groomed. So I used the sense of never feeling safe as part of her entire background. Like, she's kind of been made to feel like this her entire life. And that's what brought her to this point of the story.
What are some of the differences that the differences that you saw between knowing that you're safe in a horror aspect and knowing that you're not safe?
The fun part of it. When you know you're safe, it's fun. When you don't know you're safe, it's that sheer terror. I think we've all been in situations where we felt true panic. So I've used that, and I know, like, I have some irrational fears myself, some phobias. So I kind of always went back to that. In those times that I just felt so panicked, I didn't know what I could do. And I use that a lot for her.
I'm also curious, what's your favorite horror movie or book?
Oh, man, there's so many. This book was influenced heavily by Rosemary's Baby. So that was always one of my favorites. Another favorite is Stand By Me, which isn't really a horror, but Stephen King did write it. Recent favorite horrors that I've read, I loved Buffalo Hunter by Stephen Graham Jones and Nosferatu by Joe Hill. I mean, I could talk about my favorite horrors all day. I love
Okay,
them.
then we don't have to get too into it then. Uh, but going back to your story, or the novel, kind of required a balancing of multiple plot threads and reveals. So, how do you keep track of what the readers may know versus what the characters know at any given point?
Lots of notes. I had notes taped up on all my walls, so I would know exactly where I was when I needed to have, because I don't really outline, but I will make, as I go, I'll make notes and tape them on my wall so I'll know if I need to put a clue in here or if I need to do a reveal here. And then the rest just kind of goes organically.
Right, yeah, because I feel like it's almost nerve-wracking trying to write a story like that when you're balancing what you know, what the reader may know, and what the characters know. And it's sort of figuring out how to like bridge all that knowledge together.
Yeah, and I think you never quite know. Like I'm still not sure. Like if I revealed enough, if I didn't reveal enough, you never know truly how it's going to come across to someone else until they read it. So it's always like you do the best you can, then cross your fingers and kind of hope it turns out like you wanted it to.
And speaking of, you mentioned earlier doing a ton of research on this book, well, to write it, and it Atlantic City almost became a character itself in the story. And I guess I was just wondering what kind of drew you to this particular setting, and how did how did you research its unique culture and history?
I mean, Atlantic City is very much a character. I think it's really the starting point. So the whole story is based on this real casino in Atlantic City called Resorts. And Resorts, I used Resorts history, which was built in the 1920s. Everything from the book is kind of accurate as far as the history goes. It was the Chalfont Haddon Hall. And then during World War II, it was turned into the Thomas England General Hospital, which was the largest hospital in the United States at the time. And they served all the soldiers that were coming back from World War II injured. And I was just so fascinated by this building that I kind of took a deep dive into the history. And of course, my mind went to the dark side of it during World War II. And I mean, Nazis really have nothing to do with the story other than in the history, we were fighting them. But there's this whole occult side to Nazis and Heinrich Himmler that kind of fascinated me. So I went to the cult side of things and started researching different cults, kind of made up my own and pulled. I mean, there's so much real history throughout the story that I really hope people are like kind of pick up on some of the real things that really happened, because to me it is crazier than anything I could make up.
Right. And just from hearing your responses, you seem to be like a very big fan of history in general. Is World War II sort of like your favorite area to study?
I do really, I love history. I love all periods. That just kind of piqued my interest because of the building in Atlantic City and this kind of story, this side of Atlantic City that we never really talk about or not very many people know about. And then the whole cult and conspiracy theory side of things kind of took me into this deep dive and deep spin into all this occult stuff that happened during the time. There were so many different real, like Jack Parsons, who I mentioned in the book, became one of the forefathers of NASA, a rocket scientist who was American, but he was a occultist that had these like sex demon crazy rituals that it's almost really hard to believe. But he went on to create what we now rely on as NASA and the JBL Jet Propulsion science that got us into space. So it's very interesting to me. And with the cult stuff, I kind of sent me on a dive into religion and religious ideologies and stories. So I settled on a character of Lilith, and it really became kind of an origin story for what I hope will become an anti-hero in stories to come. And I even like I hid a clue in it, which I don't think anybody will really get this, but if you read the book and you come to Lilith's username when she logs into her casino systems, that is a little clue. So Google that and maybe look into the Dead Sea Scrolls if you want a little tip of who Lilith is.
Ooh, okay, so we get some like Easter eggs in there.
Yeah.
So you really weave together multiple historical elements into this story, from again World War II history to religious symbolism. So how do you kind of approach incorporating those real historical details into fiction?
I look at these points in history and then I kind of imagine how they would translate to modern times. So I'll take something specifically that happened in history and kind of put it into a modern time. And that's really Lilith didn't happen in history. She's a biblical character, but mentioned once in the Bible. But if you took her in modern times, what would this sort of character, what could she be? And then I added history of the location, which itself really was the first character. And then the story kind of grew from there.
And speaking of Lilith, actually, she undergoes tremendous character growth while being, manipulated and groomed by those around her.
Yeah.
How did you sort of balance her agency with her vulnerability?
She had to be very vulnerable in order to get to the point that she was, but she also had to be strong so that when she did snap eventually, she would kind of put herself back together. So it wouldn't break her, but it would change her.
Right. Was that a challenge to you? Because I feel like such a complex character like that would be challenging to write, especially as the main character.
It was challenging, and that she was a combination, like I said before, like imagining, I put like true panic and fear into her from situations that we've all been in. And then I had to imagine what it would be like if the people you had trusted your entire life that raised you kind of did so for reasons that weren't what you thought. So when you come to a point and you realize your whole life had been a lie, for Lilith, it was kind of like, should she break and fall apart and give in to everything, or go the other way? So I think there's a darkness in Lilith that she realizes she seizes on and uses that to go towards the right side of things. So it's kind of like in life, the two sides of your nature, are you destined to be what generations ahead of you have set for you, or can you make your own path? And I kind of hope that she shows people that you can make your own path. And, a good anti-hero can kind of do that. Have a little bit of fun with it.
But you always have to have a little bit of fun.
Yeah.
So another one of my questions is this is more about the genre itself. You blend thriller, psychological horror, and like religious elements almost seamlessly into this narrative. How do you sort of approach mixing these genres without losing focus?
I try not to think too deeply on, I know this is probably a bad tip because it could go very wrong. You can piss people off that like certain genres and expect certain things. But for me, I kind of try not to think about it and write the story that I would want to read. That's who I'm writing for first, I guess. I don't know if that's a good thing or a bad thing, but there's certain genres that I love, and it's horror. I'm interested in religion. I love the Dan Brown, Angels and Demons and the Da Vinci Code, which I think kind of blended genres and religion really well. So he was always a huge influence for me. And I kind of like when real life elements are taken and spun into these fantastic fiction stories where you can pull pieces of history and still learn things, but it can go in, the craziest directions. So I hope Rolling Bones did that, but that was my goal.
Well, I'm sure that you and your family are not the only people that are enjoying this book and enjoying the narrative that you crafted and the world that you created with these real historical details and fiction.
Thank you.
You wrote for yourself, but there's you got published. Like, that's huge. Let me emphasize that. That's huge. It's a huge accomplishment.
I'm very grateful to EdgeWeaver for taking me on.
My final question to you is about the writing process. So the pacing of the narrative escalates brilliantly from corporate drama to psychological horror. Did you have any techniques? Did you have any techniques that brought that to life?
I wanted to like ease into the story a little bit. And then I wanted things to like pick up quicker and quicker and quicker. So I think I didn't outline. I had a good idea of like how I wanted it to flow. And then if anything dragged in the first draft, then I kind of went through, chopped here, and I guess the first editing, second editing, third, think it was the pacing was done in the editing process, and the story was done, just writing it. So I think editing is definitely how you get the pacing down.
Did you have to trim down a lot or, move things around?
It was more like cutting up chapters. I definitely trimmed a little bit and moved things around some, but some chapters that I wrote in the first draft, which was one chapter, ended up being like 3 chapters. So I used the chapter cutting like that a lot to help with pacing.
All right. Well, thank you so much. Those were all the questions that I had and that EdgeWeaver had. But is there anything that I didn't mention, I didn't ask, that you would like to talk about or bring up?
I don't think so. I love the questions you asked me. It was really fun to talk about. Thank you.
Of course, I'm glad I gave you a chance to talk about your book that you researched and worked so hard on.
I appreciate it. It's always fun.
All right, well, thank you so much. Go read Roll Them Bones and have a good day.